"We moved last night. You can keep the dog if you want." That was all the message said. No hello, no goodbye, not even his name at the end. I stared at the screen, waiting for more to appear, but nothing came. Just a picture of Rufus sitting alone behind the rusted gate, his chain taut. His eyes wide, like he didn't understand what he'd done wrong. The timestamp said 6:42 a.m. I hadn't even made coffee yet. I'd woken up to feed the birds, check the porch light, do the small things I always did. Then I saw the message, and everything just stopped. I put on my shoes without tying them properly. The roads were still damp from last night's rain. I don't remember grabbing my keys, but they were in the ignition by the time I realized I hadn't eaten. The drive took 2 hours, long enough to go through every possible version of what I might find. Maybe they'd just forgotten something. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe they were already coming back. But when I pulled into the gravel lot and stepped out, the silence was louder than any answer they could have given me. The yard was stripped bare. No toys, no garden chairs, no curtains in the windows. Just Rufus curled beside the gate like he'd stayed up all night waiting for someone who never returned. I called his name. He didn't move. His bowl was overturned empty. His leash was gone. His tail didn't even twitch when I knelt beside him. He just looked up at me. Eyes dull, body still. I reached for the clasp on his collar, and his ears barely flicked. I unhooked the chain, lifted it away from his neck, and whispered, "Come on, boy. You're not staying here." He didn't stand. He didn't bark. He just shifted, turning slightly to face the back fence. That was when I saw it, the patch of dirt. Fresh. Disturbed. Something half-buried pressed beneath his front paw like it mattered more than anything else left behind. He didn't look at me, not really. His eyes flicked in my direction, but he didn't lift his head. His body was curled tight, like he was trying to disappear into the cold patch of dirt beneath him. I stepped closer, slow and low to the ground, and called his name again, Rufus. His ears moved, just barely. He didn't growl, didn't whimper. He just stayed there, one paw stretched out over a small mound of loose earth near the back fence. The rest of the yard had been trampled flat or stripped clean, but that one spot looked fresh raw, like it had been scraped with more desperation than care. I knelt beside him, one hand on the frozen grass, and gently brushed the dirt with my fingers. Something soft met my touch. I dug a little deeper, careful not to startle him. It was a sock. Old gray, chewed at the edge, the kind of thing a child would throw in play and a dog would never forget. Rufus pressed his nose into it when I held it up, then turned away again, like it hurt too much to remember. Beside it was a cracked rubber bone, the red faded to a dull orange teeth marks, still fresh at the edges. I didn't say anything. I just placed both items in the pocket of my coat and looked at him. He wasn't just waiting. He'd been guarding these things. Pieces of a life that walked away from him in the middle of the night without so much as a backward glance. I reached out and placed my hand on his side. He was trembling, not from cold, but from something deeper, confusion maybe. Grief, even. The kind you don't expect a dog to understand until you see it laid bare like this. I didn't say a word. I sat there with him, the wind pushing through the empty yard, carrying no scent of the people who once called this place home. When he finally leaned into me just a little, I stood up. We weren't staying another minute. I didn't plan to go inside. I just wanted to get out. But the door was still unlocked, and something in me needed to see it with my own eyes. The house echoed with every step. Not even a bulb left in the fixtures. No curtains, no rugs. Just pale outlines on the walls where furniture used to rest, and a sharp smell of dust and absence. The living room was stripped bare, except for one thing, a faded tennis ball under the couch. I picked it up and turned it in my hand. The rubber was brittle, and the fuzz had worn down to threads. I didn't throw it. I didn't even pocket it. I left it where it was. Rufus followed me through the kitchen, his nails tapping on the tile. There was nothing in the fridge but an empty egg carton and a half-used roll of tape stuck to the door. It wasn't mess they hadn't rushed. They'd simply removed themselves piece by piece until nothing remained but the space they didn't think I'd come back to. Upstairs, in what used to be the guest bedroom, I opened the closet. His leash was still hanging on the hook. I reached for it slowly, like it might bite. Next to it, taped to the wall, was a torn scrap of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sharp, rushed always, slightly slanted left. My daughter-in-law's. Don't tell her anything. She'll make it about herself. I stood there a long time. The leash in one hand. The paper in the other. I'd never asked for much. A birthday call. A photo of my grandson now and then. Maybe a visit that wasn't out of obligation. They thought I wanted attention. Maybe they never understood I just wanted to be included in a life I helped build. Downstairs, Rufus whined softly by the door. I folded the paper, once tucked it into my coat pocket, and walked out without looking back. He was waiting at the bottom of the steps, eyes on me. I clipped the leash to his collar. Then we headed home. The ride back was quiet. Rufus sat, curled in the back seat, pressed against the door, his nose tucked under his paw. Every so often he'd lift his head and glance out the window, like he was hoping to see someone, anyone familiar. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other clutching the leash he no longer needed. The only sound was the steady rhythm of the tires and the faint rattle of his tags against the seatbelt buckle. At home, I opened the front door and waited for him to step inside. He didn't. Not at first. He stood on the porch, unsure, sniffing the air, like it might tell him whether this place could be trusted. Eventually, he walked in. Slow. Cautious. Not curious, guarded. He didn't explore, didn't wag, didn't greet anything. He went straight to the door leading outside, circled once, and lay down beside it. He stayed there the entire evening. I set out a bowl of food untouched. I warmed some leftover chicken broth ignored. When I sat beside him and reached to pet his back, he didn't flinch. But he didn't lean in either. I found a thick wool blanket and laid it by the heater in the living room. I sat cross-legged beside it and waited the same way I used to wait when my son had fevers as a boy, not sleeping, not blinking too long, just listening. Around midnight, Rufus stood padded over slowly and settled beside me, letting out a heavy sigh. His body was warm, but it trembled just beneath the surface. I reached for the water bowl and brought it close. He drank, tentative at first, then steadily. I whispered, "You're safe now." And for the first time, he looked at me, not past me, not through me, just at me. Then he closed his eyes. But he didn't sleep. When the wind picked up outside and a car passed in the distance, his ears twitched, and he shifted back toward the door again. Somewhere in his mind, he was still waiting for someone else. The days slipped by like damp pages in a book no one wanted to finish. I kept to our routine, if you could call it that. Morning walks quiet, afternoons, soft words that felt like they dissolved in the air before they reached him. Rufus moved like a shadow. He followed me room to room, but never too close, never touching. When I opened the door to the backyard, he hesitated each time before stepping out like the grass might vanish beneath his paws. I had to coax him with bits of chicken breast or strips of leftover ham. Even then, his tail hung low. No wag. No spark. On Sunday, the light came in. Slow through the kitchen window, thick and golden. I was out in the garden, rinsing out the watering can, and Rufus was lying by the porch, watching, but not quite joining me. A crow landed near the bird feeder, loud and bold. It hopped forward, then pecked at the seed dish with that sharp, arrogant beak. The kind of visitor that never asked permission. I didn't notice the shift until I heard it. A single bark. Short. Sudden. Sharp enough to stop me mid-step. I turned. Rufus was standing, His ears were forward, body stiff but alert. He barked again, this time softer, like he was testing himself. The crow squawked and flew off in a huff, and Rufus's eyes followed it until it disappeared into the trees. He looked back at me, and I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loud, not long, but real. He didn't move toward me, didn't wag, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. The smallest flicker of something I hadn't seen in him since I brought him home. Curiosity. I dropped the watering can right there on the dirt and walked toward him. He didn't back away. Instead, he turned and trotted a few feet ahead like he expected me to follow. And I did, just a step behind, into the soft rustle of leaves and the faint smell of warm soil that promised more than just survival. I only meant to pick up milk. That was all. A quiet Monday morning, no crowds, no fuss. Rufus was with me in the passenger seat, calm and quiet, head resting on the edge of the window. I pulled into the lot parked near the cart return and was about to open the door when I saw them. Across the lot by the automatic doors, my son stood with his back to me, loading paper bags into the trunk of a car I didn't recognize. Sleek, black, spotless. Not the old SUV I helped them pay off 2 winters ago. He laughed at something his wife said, her face turned away from me, but her posture easy, relaxed. Their son, my grandson, sat in the back seat, absorbed in a tablet, legs kicking lazily. They looked good, healthy, comfortable, like a portrait. I didn't wave, didn't move. I don't know if they would have seen me anyway. I wasn't on their mind. That much was clear. They weren't looking for Rufus. They weren't wondering where I was. Whatever guilt I thought they might carry wasn't there. I stayed in the car. Rufus didn't react. He was still watching the breeze lift a paper bag across the asphalt, unconcerned with the people who used to be his world. Maybe he'd adjusted faster than I had. I sat there until they left, watched the taillights fade into the line of traffic without slowing. Then I pulled out of my spot and drove around the block before circling back to the store. I walked through the aisles slowly, picked up what I needed, paid in cash, didn't speak unless spoken to. Outside, the sun was too bright, the sky too wide. When I got back to the car, Rufus lifted his head, eyes soft. I opened the door, and he climbed into the seat without hesitation. That night, I made soup for one and poured half a bowl of broth into his dish. He finished it all and lay down at my feet, like he'd never belonged anywhere else. The message came just after 9. Hey, hope Rufus is okay. Let me know if you need help. No punctuation after hey. No question mark. No apology. No explanation. Just those 2 lines dropped into my inbox, like we were still speaking, like everything was still open. I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading it, trying to hear the tone in his voice. Was it guilt, obligation, a performance for someone watching? I didn't answer. Instead, I went to the hallway closet and pulled down the old photo album, the one with the peeling green spine and dog-eared pages. I hadn't opened it in years. The corners stuck together. The scent of old paper clung to my fingers. Near the middle, a photo slipped loose. My son, age 9. Kneeling in the backyard, his arms wrapped around a scrawny, mud-covered puppy. His face beaming with pride. The dog's name was Toby, the first stray he ever brought home. He had begged for him, promised to feed him, walk him, love him, swore he'd never want anything more. And I, after 3 days of saying no, finally said yes. I remembered the night Toby chewed through the baseboard, and I threatened to take him back to the shelter. My son cried so hard he made himself sick. He slept on the floor beside Toby for a week afterward. That boy would have never left Rufus behind. I pressed the photo flat and slid it back between the pages, closed the album gently, placed it back where it belonged on the high shelf where the light didn't reach often. Some versions of the people we love live only in those shelves. Some never come back. Rufus padded over, nosed at my leg, then settled beside me with a soft grunt. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Branches tapped against the window in a rhythm that sounded familiar and foreign all at once. I turned off the lamp and sat with him in the dark, waiting for the night to pass on its own time. I woke up before the alarm. No reason, no noise. Just that strange stillness that doesn't let you sleep. I reached for the quilt edge and instinctively looked toward the front door where Rufus usually slept. He wasn't there. The bowl was full, the blanket untouched. I moved quietly through the house, calling his name softly, not wanting to startle him. Rufus. I found him in the hallway just beyond the laundry room. He was standing perfectly still, staring at the wall. His ears were forward, body stiff, not afraid, but focused. A streetlight outside cast a crooked shadow across the drywall branches, moving slow and twitching. But it wasn't the tree he was watching. It was the space just beyond it, the shape near the floor, the suggestion of movement. He growled low and uncertain. Not a threat, not even a warning, just something primal, a sound wrapped in memory. Then he sat, still staring, and I understood. It wasn't danger he sensed, it was habit. Maybe at that hour when the house was silent and the walls didn't argue back, he remembered the footsteps that used to cross this floor, the click of a front door, a voice, a hand that never came back. Even now, even here, he was waiting. I knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his back. He didn't move away, but his eyes stayed fixed on the shadow like it had made a promise and broken it. We stayed like that for a long time, both of us caught in a space between presence and absence. The room was warm, but the silence pressed cold against my shoulders. Eventually, Rufus let out a breath, something long and tired, and lowered his head to my lap. His eyes closed. Whatever he'd expected hadn't arrived. Again. I didn't move. We sat there until the light shifted, until the shadow turned into something else entirely, and morning crept quietly down the hallway toward the front of the house. The evening light stretched long across the gravel road, soft and golden, brushing the tops of the grass like fingertips. I clipped the leash onto Rufus's collar out of habit, though he no longer pulled. We walked the same path we always did, past the garden, down the hill, toward the edge of the woods. He was quiet, but different. Less hesitant. More present. When we reached the bend near the tree line, Rufus stopped. Not abruptly, just with purpose. He lifted his head and stared into the trees, ears pricked. I waited beside him, expecting the usual squirrel-rabbit wind. But this time, he didn't bolt or bark. He just stood there. Then he turned his head slightly, as if listening for something I couldn't hear. We stood still together for what felt like minutes. Me watching him. Him watching the woods. No one came. He sniffed the air long and deep, then exhaled through his nose and took a step forward. And then another. I didn't say a word. I let the leash go slack and followed behind, letting him set the pace. It felt unfamiliar, that reversal me trailing him instead of leading. But right somehow. Like this was what he needed. Like maybe it was what I needed too. He didn't stop to check for me. He knew I'd be there. He walked steadily, confidently, nose low to the ground, tail swaying not high, not wagging, but relaxed. We didn't go far. Just to the clearing by the old fence line, where the wildflowers bloom in spring. He circled, once sniffed at the roots of a cedar stump, then sat down in the grass. I sat beside him. The woods didn't feel empty that evening. Just quiet. Rufus closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again, and rested his head against my knee. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. The wind picked up slightly, and somewhere above us a bird chirped once, and then went silent again. We stayed until the light dipped low enough to turn everything gold and soft and unspoken. The porch light flickered, once then, steadied, casting a soft glow across the steps, just as the sun disappeared behind the line of trees. I didn't bother adjusting it. It always flickered around this time of year, like it was deciding whether the night was worth lighting. Rufus lay curled at my feet, his head resting against the side of my slipper. His breathing was deep, slow, steady, the kind of rhythm that comes only when something in you has finally let go of waiting. I sat with a cup of tea that had long since gone lukewarm, watching the wind stir through the trees, rustling leaves like pages in a book I'd already read. The house behind me was quiet. Not empty, just settled. I didn't expect anyone. Not a call, not a knock, not even a message. Not anymore. For the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't ache. Rufus shifted in his sleep and let out a deep sigh. I smiled almost without realizing and mirrored him. There'd been no grand ending, no apology, no confrontation. But there was this him and me side by side after everything that had fallen away. He hadn't chosen to be left. Neither had I, but we had chosen what came next. The light above buzzed softly, then held firm, casting a warm circle around us. The kind of light that said, "Here, stay a while." I looked down at Rufus, his ear twitching in a dream, his body soft and warm against mine. He didn't need anyone else to come back. He didn't even seem to remember that they were supposed to. And maybe that was the gift, not forgetting, but learning how to remember without pain. The wind carried the faintest trace of pine through the air. I leaned back in the chair, folded the blanket around my legs, and settled in. Rufus didn't stir. The night stretched out in front of us, quiet and unhurried, as if it had finally made room for two things that still belonged to each other.